Okay, welcome to the video. SIG Guy here. I think the #1 request I've received over the past few years is a video on how I clean and maintain my P365s. It's taken a long time to do this video because if there's one thing that I do not enjoy about firearms is cleaning them. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, before I get started, I just want to take a quick second to thank everybody that has liked and subscribed to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate it, and I hope you find these videos helpful. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can find the subscribe button right down here in the corner. If you could smash that baby, I'd really appreciate it. A couple different reasons. The more subscribers YouTubers have, the more our content gets shared. Right now, 2A is under attack more so than ever, so we need all the help that we can get. Secondly, when I post new content, you get notified right away, so you never miss anything. Again, thank you everybody that has liked and subscribed to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. All right, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat this at all. This is going to be long-winded and drawn out. So if you are those viewers that just cannot stand to hear my voice, I would recommend putting it on mute and skipping towards the end where I actually disassemble, clean, lubricate, and reassemble the 365. If you are the viewers that love to hear my voice, well, God bless you. I love you too. You are in for a treat today as there's a lot of stuff that I want to share. So first we're going to talk about the different categories of lubricants. Then we're going to talk about cleaning solvents, and then we'll talk about the tools and stuff that I use to clean the 365, and then we'll disassemble, clean, lubricate, and reassemble the 365. So I also want to start off by saying this is how I do mine. Okay, this is how I clean mine. These are the products that I use. I'm not trying to sit here and say that whatever you use is not the right product or whatever, even though it may be. I'm not going to sit here and start a debate. That's not what this video is all about. That's the reason why I didn't really want to do this type of video, is because it's always a hot topic for a debate and an argument. Whatever worked for you for years, you do you. It's your money. It's your gun. The viewers and subscribers that are relatively new, they've asked me to do this video. So I'm going to try to give them the best information that I know. That way they can form their own opinion. I will, however, say the reasons why I don't use particular products. That way they can form their own decisions. So with that, let's move on to the first category of lubricants, oil. All right, lubrication. It performs three major functions when used on firearms. It reduces friction, prevents corrosion and rust, and it helps ease of cleaning. Okay, and the first category in lubrication we're going to talk about is oil. Somewhere in your owner's manual, it'll probably say something like, the manufacturer recommends that you only use products that are specifically designed for firearms. Okay, this is where the debate starts on which products to use. So a fan favorite is this stuff right here. I don't see anywhere on here where it says anything about firearms. There's a lot of mention of NASCAR and stuff like that. But this does not go 3,000 to 6,000 RPMs every single time I pull the trigger. So the requirements for an engine and the requirements for a pistol are two different requirements. Not sure why I'm going to use this on this. I certainly wouldn't put this in my engine. Okay. The debate usually comes down to cost. So this I've had about 8 years. There's still plenty left in it. And this probably does cost more than this. I'm not going to dispute that at all. What I'm going to dispute is if you can't afford $5 extra or however much more this costs, how would you afford this? And how do you afford to shoot this when rounds are almost $1 a round right now? It just doesn't make sense to me. So just use the stuff that's intended for the by the manufacturer. I mean, you can throw this right in your range bag. I'd rather have that in there than this. There's probably no room for this anyway, along with the tube of grease as well. So I use oil in between components that move, but they don't move fast or a lot. Okay, so like in between, like in your action between the sear and the safety lever, pins and stuff like that, I'll do a light coat of oil. Compared to my frame rails and stuff like that, I'll use grease where it needs a little bit more help than oil. So that's oil. Let's move on to grease. Okay, perhaps the most controversial part of this whole thing is the use of grease in the firearms. I'll talk about a couple things here to do with the grease. One being that SIG Sauer for a long time actually provided grease with their firearms right from the manufacturer. So they're the leaders, one of the leaders in the industry. And if they're saying, hey, I want you to use this and this, I think I'm going to go with their word versus people in forums that seem to think their opinion matters more than the manufacturer. So I've been using grease for a long time. I like it because it stays put. I started using it in my AR. Those typically run a lot harder than something like a pistol, and it does a very excellent job at keeping it lubricated. So I've been using it in my pistols, and I notice there's a lot less wear. It's so much easier to clean, and I've had no problems with it whatsoever. A couple things to do with the controversy regarding grease is people say it acts like a lapping compound inside your pistol. Grease actually, the way it works is it kind of encapsulates the debris, the gunpowder or carbon, gunpowder, whatever you want to call it, dirt, dust, sand, whatever gets inside there, it kind of encapsulates it and it prevents it from wearing and rubbing on those surfaces like lapping compound would. So I can understand that if you're the type of person that brags about never cleaning their firearm since they've owned it and they've had it for many, many years and they fire it all the time, well, then yes, it probably does act like lapping compound because there's so much crap inside your firearm. It has no choice but to be like that. But for regular use and preventive maintenance, and if you follow the cleaning schedule, that's completely false information there. Another topic for debate is cost. People use different types of grease rather than gun grease because it's a lot cheaper. So I just had a debate with a guy a couple days ago where Lucas, he says their tube of grease, which is the tube that would go into a grease gun, kind of like a caulking type container, is the exact same grease as in their gun grease, which comes in a smaller container like this. This cost, it was $10 relatively, their Lucas there, versus $5 for their bigger tube of, it's actually automotive grease for like wheel bearings and ball joints and stuff like that. So he says it's the exact same product in that tube, which is made for guns. So I'm not familiar with the products, and before I argue with anybody or debate, I'm going to actually do a little research so I know what I'm talking about. I went on Lucas's website and got the technical data for both greases, compared them side by side, and wouldn't you know it, they're completely different greases. It is not the same grease. They come in the same color containers, but other than that, that's about where the similarity ends. Not gun grease in the wheel bearing, the ball joint grease. I wouldn't use this in my truck's ball joints, and I wouldn't use that other stuff in my pistol. So again, if cost is such an issue, I don't know how you even afford the firearm or the rounds to fire through it. If you can't spend $5 more on a product. I've had this for about 3 years. I got a tube in my truck, a tube in my range bag, a tube here on the bench. I have yet to even use up a tube as long as I've been shooting, so I don't see where cost is a determining factor and where you want to use the wrong product in your firearm. So that's my spin on grease. When I use grease and where I use grease is where the components move faster, more heat, like on my frame rails, my slide, my barrel, the hood, anything like that. Oil for slower moving components, grease for faster components that generate more heat. So let's move on to the next category. Okay, the last three categories, I'm going to kind of lump them together because I really don't have a whole lot to say about each of them. The dry lube, I use Rem Dry Lube. I've used it in the past. In my other videos, I've used it. And basically, the only place I've ever really used this is on my strikers. Your strikers and your firing pins need to be bone dry when you put them back in. When you spray it with this, basically goes on wet and then it evaporates and leaves behind like a Teflon coating, a real slick coating. So I have no problems using that on my striker. As far as other areas in the pistol, your sear, safety lever, barrel, hood, I mean, I don't know. I've never used it. I'm not going to recommend it for that. All I'm going to say is use it as the manufacturer intended, okay? The other category would be kind of the one-size-fits-all. This cleans, lubricates, and protects. This one's from SIG. I just picked this up the other day. CLP is another fan favorite. Basically, you're going to put this on the part. You're going to let it sit for a little while, allow it time to penetrate, and then go back later on and wipe it off. It's going to clean it, and then it's going to leave behind a protective barrier to prevent rust and corrosion. So I don't use this a lot. Basically, the grease is my number one favorite, and then a little bit of oil here and there. That's kind of what I recommend. So the silicone cloth is, people love these too as well, and I use that quite a bit on my Safe Queens guns that I'm really not going to do any videos with, and don't really intend shooting them. They're going to sit in the safe forever. Basically, I'm going to wipe it down with this. This kind of leaves a nice silicone coating to where you can see your fingerprints if you were touching it and everything afterwards. You don't want to do that when you apply this. You want to basically kind of hold it down here or any non-metal surface, and then kind of wipe that rag all over it. You don't want the oils and stuff from your fingers being left on there. Then I basically put it on my gun stand and throw it in the safe. So that's the silicone gun cleaning rag there. So let's move on to the next category in this video. We're going to talk about cleaning solvents. All right, nothing really too much to discuss here. The two I use, the Hoppies, the bore cleaner, and the general gun cleaner here. I basically, when I take the firearm apart, I'm going to put this all over my barrel, inside the chamber, the feed ramp, anywhere there's a ton of carbon buildup. I'm going to soak it with this stuff, and then I'm going to let it set while I clean everything else with the general cleaner. I'm just going to, this is a spray mist. I'm going to spray everything down, let it set for a minute, and then I'm going to go back and wipe it off and get all of this stuff off of it, and then I'll lubricate it after that. So that's really it. Not really a whole lot to tell about this. You'll see this in action when we go to take this apart and clean it. Okay, cleaning products. I mean, everybody's got their own way of doing things, so by all means, you don't need all this stuff. I don't even use all this stuff on a lot of them. Whatever you're using to clean them, keep on using them. So I'm a big fan of these kind of dental picks. They're plastic. Some of the ends break off over time. I'll use these to put a cleaning patch on it and get in real tight areas and stuff. Q-tips, everybody's favorite friend in so many different hobbies. So those are really good at the hard to reach places. The nylon brush, big fan of that. It's got a big end, small end inside your rails and stuff like that. A grip module, your FCU, something you don't want to completely disassemble, but you want to try to clean a lot of that stuff out of there. That's good to use. Obviously a bore brush, 9mm. And then I like the cable ones here for my cleaning patches. Cleaning patches, obviously another fan favorite. And then bore snakes. This is for my AR. I don't have a 9mm one, but I wanted to show you kind of what a bore snake is like. When you buy this, it kind of does all the steps at once. Let me untangle it here. It's got a nylon rope with a weight that you can drop down through the barrel in the beginning. And then you pull it through your barrel. This one's longer, like I said, because it's for my AR. And then the first section here has got some cotton, okay, or whatever it's made of. You can put some oil or CLP or bore cleaner or whatever you want on there, because that's going to go through the barrel first. And then this next section, it's like little brass, feel that? Or you see hear that? It's kind of like brass brushes there that are going to go through after that lubrication goes through there to help break it up. Then this is going to go to scrub it. And then basically this whole section here is just to wipe it down, and it gets kind of thicker at the end here, so it gets tighter as you pull it through there. So you basically run that through there 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 times, whatever your heart desires. It's going to kind of clean it in one fell swoop. So I really do like that for the AR. It's a lot easier than using bore brushes with the long lengths of rod and stuff like that. Plus it doesn't scratch up your barrel or anything like that. So not a whole lot to say about all these. We'll see them in action as we move on to our next step, which is we're going to disassemble this and start cleaning the 365. Alright, so I've switched out my cleaning mat to one here that if I spill anything, it's going to help absorb it. And obviously follow your product manufacturer's recommendations on whether you're using eye protection gloves, because these are harsh chemicals and stuff like that. Safety first, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of disassemble my 365. I'm going to remove my magazine. I'm going to lock my slide to the rear, and I'm going to physically and visually check the chamber, the breech face, the mag well to make sure there is no round in the chamber or a magazine installed. I'm going to look away, and I'm going to do it again because sometimes our eyes play tricks on us. So we are free and clear. I'm going to rotate my takedown lever, release my slide, and remove my slide from my grip module. So I'm going to kind of do this in two different categories, I guess. Like I talked about before, the stuff I'm going to put with bore cleaner I'm going to set aside here while I clean everything else down, and I allow that time to penetrate and stuff. So this shouldn't be really dirty at all. I'm pretty sure I didn't even shot it since I cleaned it last, but we'll go through the motions as if it was disgusting and dirty. So my guide rod and recoil spring, I'm going to set that over here. I'm going to remove my barrel. I'm going to put that here. And then I have my slide. And then a lot of the videos on the internet, basically they don't even have you take the grip module out of your frame. I don't see why not. It's 2 seconds to do that, and you can get a lot of the areas a lot more clean. So I'm going to use my pin removal tool. I do sell these on my website, sigguy.com. This is specific for the 365. It fits this hole right here where this pin is located, and we can push this pin out either side, just like that. And I have a 365 complete disassembly video if you need any more instructions on how to remove and assemble parts of the 365. So we're going to remove this by pulling up on the rear and then pulling it out just like that. And then I'm going to set this here. I'm going to set this here. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get my bore cleaner going. We're going to open this up. I'm going to grab a paper towel just in case it wants to run all over the place. I'm going to put that right here, and then I'm going to use my Q-tip, and I'm going to totally saturate, oops, where you can see it, everywhere there might be carbon in this barrel. And with this stuff, the more the better. You cannot use too much. The more you use, the easier it's going to be to clean. So all inside the barrel, the chamber, the feed ramp, all around the chamber in these areas gets a lot of carbon, especially if you got a loaded chamber indicator up here. And then you can even wipe down your barrel with this stuff and set it aside. So we're just going to give that time to penetrate. I'm going to close this up because I don't use it for anything else and I don't want to spill it. On my grip module, I'm basically just going to use a rag. I find t-shirts, old t-shirts work the best. And I'm basically just going to wipe this down. These don't get terribly dirty. If they do get dirty, it's where the magazine area is right here. That's where your chamber is. When your slide opens up, all that carbon gets past the FCU and into the grip module. So I'm just going to wipe this all down. This is Cerakoted, so I really don't want to use any harsh chemicals on it. If you have a factory one that's not Cerakoted, you can use your general gun cleaner, kind of spray it down, let it set as well, and then wipe it all off, and then use a Q-tip to get the hard to reach areas. Air compressors are also a good idea. Some say yes, some say no. I mean, if there's areas you cannot get, I mean, I would say go ahead and use it. Some people believe that you're pushing that debris further into areas that you can't get. Use it at your own discretion, really. I have no problems using an air compressor. One thing I would not use, and a lot of people like to use, is brake cleaner. Brake cleaner will melt plastic. Okay? If you put that on there and leave it on there for just a few minutes, it is going to totally ruin this grip module. Okay? So brake cleaner, it really, I mean, that stuff works awesome. It gets all the oils and stuff off of whatever you're using. Okay? It basically suspends the oil and gives you time to wipe it off or blow it off. And then when it dries, it's completely dry, the surface there. But it's a very harsh chemical, and it will actually, I have screwdrivers and stuff that I've used brake clean to clean the screwdriver handles, and they're like, they were colored like orange, green, black, whatever. They're like white now because it even took the color of the pigment out of the plastic, and it's basically ruined the plastic. So I would not use brake clean on anything gun related. Okay, especially if you're going to leave it on there for any length of time. So I just wipe down the grip module, and then my FCU, it all depends on how dirty it is. If this thing is disgusting, because I got done testing a trigger or a barrel or a slide or a comp or whatever, for me it's pretty easy just to take this whole thing completely apart, clean it all up, put it all back together. A lot of people don't feel comfortable with that, which is certainly understandable. And round counts are typically kind of low, so I have no problems, if you get in here with your nylon brush and just start working things around like this. I don't like to soak this with like gun cleaner or anything like that, okay, because there's areas where I don't want gun cleaner. Down inside the action here and stuff is one area, but if you're going to blow it out with compressed air afterwards, I don't see the harm in doing that. If you don't have a compressor, there's pockets and stuff down here where I don't want pools of that sitting in there and then collecting dirt and dust and turning into a paste or a muck or anything like that. So I'm just basically gonna, rub it like this, get all that carbon off of there, hit it with, canned air. If you got canned air too, that's a good thing. Blow it off. Just be very careful because some of this stuff will actually fall apart. Like your slide catch lever, those are notorious for falling off. Your takedown lever, your slide catch lever. You don't want these pins here to walk their way out. You don't want your trigger bar spring to actually fall off, because then the disconnector and stuff like that will fall out. There's a little pin right back here, this C-clip type pin that holds the pin in that we took out previously. It's got grooves on each ends. That's what captures that pin and locks it in place. So we don't really want to be scrubbing and stuff on there and accidentally knock that off. You don't even notice it, and then you're shooting your pistol and you notice your pin keeps walking out because that's gone. So just be very careful. The less the better if you're not very experienced with taking apart the FCU. That'd be my opinion there, okay? There's not really a whole lot that needs to be done to that. As far as lubricating, I mean, I have no problems putting a drop of oil down inside here. I clean mine all the time, so I really don't do that. I do use a little bit of grease in between the sear spring and the sear because it helps put it back together, which helps lubricate it a little bit. But that's not even necessary either. There's not really a whole bunch that has to really be done with the FCU. If it's going to be, you know, a concealed carry or a safe clean or anything like that, I see no harm in wiping it down with your silicone rag. That way it has kind of a protective barrier on there from rust and corrosion as well. Okay, so I'm going to install that back into my grip module. I'm going to put my pin back in there. You don't need to lube that pin up or anything. And I'm going to set this aside. One thing that's always often overlooked is your magazines. It's a good idea to keep an eye on these and make sure they're in perfect working order. If you're having a lot of failures to lock back and stuff, the follower could be worn away here where that pushes up on your slide catch. These are not terribly difficult to remove. I'll do one here real quick. We're just going to push in on our detent there. I'm going to keep my finger underneath it because it is spring loaded, and then I'm going to let my spring come out. Sometimes it'll shoot right out on you, but I'm going to help pull it out just like that. So what I could do is I can just put my rag, you know, use a screwdriver or something, poke it down there and pull it out the other side. I'm going to run that through there a couple times to help clean some of the carbon that might be in there. I can wipe my spring down. A lot of the manufacturers, they tell you to like take a cleaning patch and put oil on it and use that to wipe things down. So you're getting that light coat of oil on there as well, which would be great in a magazine. Your follower, make sure you're nice and clean up there. If any of these pieces fall off, the follower and the bottom piece here, they do go on only one way, okay? So just be careful and make sure that they are orientated the way that they need to be going back together. Your follower needs to be pointed up, okay? Not pointed down. If you have it pointed down, it's in there the wrong way because the round needs to be pointing up as it goes into up the feed ramp, okay? And then make sure we're gonna obviously put it in the right way. It only goes in one way. And I'm gonna slide our base pad back on until it clicks into place. And then we can just wipe down the exterior of our magazine. These are often overlooked, but it's a good idea to make sure they're maintained. This is kind of a throwaway item. It's eventually going to wear out. You know, I mean, I guess you could get parts to rebuild it if you want or whatever, but just probably buy new magazines would probably be the recommendation there. Our captured guide rod assembly, not a lot you need to do here. You certainly don't need to disassemble it or anything like that. Just kind of wipe it down with a rag, maybe your nylon brush. I'm going to get in there and clean some of that carbon that is going to be on there. And again, you could take a patch with some oil on it and wipe it down afterwards to give it a little coat of lubricant there as well. Okay, next I'm going to move on to my slide. I have a bunch of videos on my YouTube, and there are different variations or variants of some of the components and the way that they come apart. So just pay attention and know which type you have before you go to disassemble some of this stuff. That way you don't damage it removing it the wrong way. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I'm going to remove my striker assembly and my extractor because those are two areas that get extremely dirty. But not everybody feels comfortable doing that. So if you're not comfortable doing that, then by all means do not do it. Just be very careful not to get any lubrication in through our hole here where our striker comes through, okay? Because it needs to be completely bone dry inside there. And with the FCU, there's videos that I have on my YouTube that show you how to completely take that whole thing apart. If that's something you feel like you're inclined to do and you have the experience and confidence that you can do that, by all means, if you want to take that apart, clean everything all up, put it all back together, make sure you do a proper functions check afterwards to make sure everything operates properly. That's the type of person I am. Whatever you feel comfortable with is what you should do. So having said that, if you don't feel comfortable taking this apart and you're new to firearms or whatnot, then I would just take my nylon brush. I'm not going to spray this all down because it's not dirty, but I would take my general purpose gun cleaner. I would spray it all over my slide, I would completely get everything wet. Like I said, being very careful not to get anything inside the hole here where our striker comes through there and contacts our primer. But I'm going to soak everything down. I'm going to let it set. And I'm going to come back once it's set for a little while, and I'm going to use my nylon brush. And I'm just going to kind of rub the whole thing down, break all that carbon up. I grease my rails and the FCU that my slide runs on, so that grease is going to be built up inside there. I'll probably use the smaller end of my brush, and I'm going to get in there like this, and I'm just going to essentially just kind of rub the whole thing down and help that CLP or general cleaner or whatever you're using. I'm going to aid that in breaking up that carbon. I'm going to do the bottom surface here. I'm going to be careful not to try to get anything back here, because again, that's where the striker is operating. And then when it's relatively dry, I'm going to kind of get my breech face here, clean that up, the sides of my slides, where my barrel comes through, and then the outside of my the slide here. I'm going to kind of get that all down. And then what I'll do is I'll take a rag and wipe the whole thing down, get it as dry as I can. And obviously there's going to be areas that aren't dry, so I'm going to go back again with a Q-tip, and I'm going to get them in all those creases and crevices and get all of that cleaner out of there, because this cleaner, I'm not sure if it's lubricant as well. It's not, like I said, the one size fits all, the CLP or this here. So I make sure that I get all of this out of there. And even some components, which people might cringe or whatnot, but I'll actually bring them to the sink and clean them off with hot water. That way I get all of this stuff off of there. And then I'll make sure they're completely dry, and then I'll lube them up individually. That way I know there's going to be no problems. Anyway, so that's the way I would do it if I'm new to the firearms and I don't feel really comfortable disassembling this stuff. I feel a little bit comfortable taking this stuff apart, so that's what I'm going to kind of do. I'm going to grab a screwdriver here. Mine is the old style slide cap. I actually went back to this style because I actually prefer it. It's a lot easier to take apart. The other one gets kind of boogered up after you take it out a couple times. Again, I have videos on my YouTube, so if you're not sure which one you have, make sure you go to my video that I show you how to remove both style striker assemblies. This one here has got the old style where it's just got that plunger, where I'm basically just gonna push it in like this, and that relieves the tension on my back plate here, and I can use my finger to push it off. The newer style, you have to use your screwdriver or whatever you're going to use on the side of it. You need to pull it in towards the center of this cavity here. So you need to pull it in and then rotate your screwdriver on the back side of it, and then pull it slightly down into this cavity. That will relieve the tension on your back plate and you can slide it off. So again, I'm just going to push in on here, and I'm going to slide my back plate up. Oops. Let me do that again on camera. I think I was off camera. I'm going to slide this in here, pull it towards me, and use my finger to slide my back plate up. And then I'm going to lift my back plate off, and then I'm going to keep my finger over it so nothing comes shooting out of there, okay? The back plate, really nothing going on there. You can hit it with your nylon brush or whatever, you wipe it down. Does not need to be lubed up or anything like that. Our striker is kind of caught in there by our striker safety. So basically this piece here is spring loaded. Spring loaded. And again, this is all in my complete disassembly video of the 365, where I go a little bit slower and explain how everything works. But what I need to do here is I'm going to push that in with my finger. I'm going to keep my finger over it, and I can bring my striker and pull that out. Okay, I'm going to set that here, and I'm going to slowly relieve the tension on here because it is spring loaded. And then you want to pay particular attention to how it's positioned in there before we pull it out. Okay, that little leg is facing me. I can pull that up and out of there. And then be careful of the spring that just fell out, which is right here. Very small spring, so don't lose it. So those two pieces and my striker, and then now I can get my striker cavity and clean that out. So again, if you're going to completely disassemble this thing, what I would do is I would stick some bore cleaner in there and let it sit for a little bit, and then I would run my bore brush in there. Again, this is the way I do mine. You may do yours different, but the 9mm brush doesn't fit in there tight, but it fits in there good enough to where I can, kind of move it around like this, back and forth, and clean that out. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll usually take a cleaning patch, which is going to get completely stuck to my 9mm brush, but that's okay. And I'll force that in there, and I'll pull it out, and then that helps get that nice and clean. Okay, so I'll do that, or I'll use Q-tips, or I'll use a rag, you know, at the end of one of my dental picks like this, and get in there. Whatever it takes to get that cavity completely dry after you put the bore cleaner in there. Okay, when you're done with that, you're not going to lube that up at all or anything. And then I'm going to hit this hole with my striker safety. I'm going to clean that up down where the spring goes. Stick this down in here. I'm going to get everything. See, mine's pretty clean. Get everything nice and bone dry. Okay. Your striker assembly. Basically, the only reason why I removed this is to do the cavity. I'm not really going to mess with this at all. You can completely disassemble this, and I have videos showing how to do that if that's something you need to do. But for the most part, all I really do on my striker is sometimes carving gets built up on the tip here. I'm just going to take my bore brush. I'm going to kind of work it so it comes off. Just like that. Until it's shiny silver. And then I'll use my rag, clean that. And that's it. I'm not going to hit this with Rem Dry Lube or anything because I don't want that stuff, you know, caking in here and getting stuck in there. It doesn't not need to be lubricated. So our channel here is cleaned. Our striker is clean. These components here are clean. Now we're going to reassemble. We're going to stick the spring in the side of this just like this. This is just like a mag release. Okay. And don't forget, this is pointing towards me like this in the slide. I'm going to rotate the whole thing like this, so I want it pointed down. Put that little spring in there. Put this little spring in the hole there. This is kind of tricky sometimes, unless you nail it on the first time. Sometimes that lock goes in crooked. Sometimes the spring goes this way, the lock goes that way. You basically want to look inside the channel here, and when you push it down and in, you shouldn't be able to see anything. When you lift it up, you should be able to see that lock inside the cavity here. That prevents the striker from going forward and hitting their primer. That's what it's getting caught on, and that's why you can't get this out of there, because it's not depressed, which allows the striker to move freely. So I'm going to push that in with my finger. I'm going to push my striker in, and then that will lock into that lock and keep it from coming out. Okay. And then I'm just going to install my back plate. And again, on my other video, that shows you an easy way to do this if you have the other type of the housing here with the other different lever to remove it. Anyway, to put this type on, you just push it in with your finger. Start your back plate like that. And then when you push it up and in, you should hear it click, which locks it in place. Give it a little tug, doesn't move, and there you go. Okay, so my slide's all put back together. I'm going to clean it just like I described before, finishing it up. And then I might use a cleaning patch with a dental pick. What I usually do is kind of fold these in half, and then I'll get my dental pick with the hook on it, and I'll basically clean my frame rails with that, like this. You know, go back and forth, get all that cleaning lube out of there, and old grease or whatever the case may be. I'll also take my nylon brush and clean the breech face really good. I would recommend doing this before you clean your striker cavity there. That way, if any of the stuff gets down inside there, you're not getting it back into there. Also, your extractor. The extractor, there's a pin here. Again, in one of my videos shows how to remove all this stuff. You basically drive that pin out. And then you can take your extractor right out if that's what you want to do, or if you can get your nylon brush and some bore cleaner before you clean your striker cavity, and then just kind of get in behind that extractor. Okay, a lot of carbon builds up in behind it. Basically, this is what grabs onto the case, just like that, how my screwdriver's behind it. A lot of carbon gets built up inside here, and then it can't grab onto it as good, and you might have some malfunctions because of that. Okay, so just your brush, get in behind there really good if you're not going to take it apart. That's sufficient enough to clean that. And then when you take this all apart, you can actually clean inside here as well. There's 2 springs in here, or a spring and a buffer, depending on what style you have. Just make sure you don't lose any of those parts and put them all back together the way they came out. So then our slide will be all cleaned up. What I would do next is my barrel. I'm basically going to wipe down the outside of it. That bore cleaner's been soaking on that for however long it's taken you, probably about a half an hour. And then what you'll do is you'll take your bore brush and just kind of keep working it through there, depending on how dirty it is, how many times you need to really run it through there. This is not dirty at all, so that would be enough. And then what I would do is I would take my cleaning patch and run it down afterwards. And then with your bore, I'm not sure if this is recommended or not, but what I do is I kind of lightly hit my feed ramp with my bore brush. Not hard enough to where you want to take off some of that nitride or what the factory coating is. It's probably worn off anyway, depending on how much you fire your pistol. Certainly take the nylon brush, and if you got a loaded chamber indicator or anywhere around the opening of the chamber here, I'm cleaning all that carbon off. The lugs underneath here, I'm making sure those are nice and clean. And then I'm just going to wipe down the whole barrel with my brush, scrub it down again, and then clean it off again. You can't do this too much. Just get it so everything's completely clean, whatever order you want to do it in. I'll run, a couple patches through here, and then my very last patch, I'll put a brand new one on there, and I'll put some oil on my patch. Just a little bit on both sides, on a clean patch, not a dirty patch like this, and then I'll run it into my barrel a couple times. I don't need it soaking wet in there, but I want a nice oil coating on there. When you look down inside there with the light, you can see it's nice and shiny all the way around. That way, if I'm not going to shoot this and it's going to sit and stay safe, rust and corrosion is not going to form in there. So what I'm going to do also is I would take my Tetra grease, and I'm not going to lube this up because I'm probably going to make more videos with this pistol. But I take Tetra grease and I put it on the barrel right here, and I'll use my fingers and smear it all around. I'll put some on my hood and the both sides here, and I'll work that around. And then I'll take grease and I'll put a dab right here. You can see how it's worn from the hood. When it unlocks, it contacts right here. So I'll put a dab of grease on there, and then I'll work it around with a Q-tip. And the way grease is supposed to be applied is when you put it on there, you work it around until it goes clear. Okay, so if this is white grease, I basically want to keep working it around until it's not white anymore, it's just clear, and that's the proper way to apply grease. Okay. So I lube that up, I lube my barrel up, and then I'm going to put my barrel back in here. I'll actually kind of go like this a couple times and smear that grease around. You'll feel how smooth and silky smooth that'll move. And I'll put my guide rod back in, just like that. And then this part here is all set. Okay, final reassembly of the 365. What I would do is I would take some of my Tetra grease, and I'm going to put a light coat here on my rails, on my FCU, where it rides inside the slide. Okay, and then I'm either going to use my finger or a Q-tip, and I'm going to work that until it turns clear. I'm going to get here inside the rails, both sides, just like that. Nice light coat of that Tetra grease. Okay, if your takedown lever has worked its way back to this position here, you'll notice you cannot rotate it, and you'd be like, why can't I move that? Well, you got to lift up on your slide release while you rotate your takedown lever, and then I'll hold that with my finger just like that. Also, if your safety lever has worked its way into the up position and lubrication is holding it up, just like this, you'll notice my screwdriver is running into it. Some people, when they install their slide, it gets caught up and they don't know what it's getting caught on, so they try to force it even harder. Well, I guarantee you're not going to be able to break that off to get your slide to go on. So basically remove your slide, just make sure that guy's in the down position just like that, and then your slide will be able to clear it no problem. So I'm going to install my slide, lift up on my slide catch, rotate my takedown lever, and release my slide. And before I wipe this down with this silicone rag, I'm going to perform a functions check, okay, to make sure everything's working properly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install my magazine and I'm going to release my magazine and make sure it falls out under gravity. Okay, if that's the case, then that's working properly. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock my slide to the rear again. I'm going to physically and visually check to make sure there's nothing in the chamber. Breech face, mag well, look away, chamber, breech face, mag well, we're all clear. I'm going to release my slide. I'm going to pull the trigger. It's going to go off. And then I'm going to rack my slide to the rear while holding my trigger and release the slide. I'm going to slowly go forward with my trigger. Reset. That works fine. Pull the trigger again. That works fine. Okay. And then one more time, I'm going to rack the slide. And then I'm going to slightly unlock my upper. And I'm going to pull the trigger. Nothing happens. So basically what's happening is I'm going like this. I've unlocked it. And that's letting the disconnector, seeing if that's working properly, which it is removing the trigger bar from the sear. Works properly. Okay. So then what I would do is I'm going to wipe down my whole slide, everything that's metal. You can see how the silicone makes it all nice and shiny. It looks wet. Everything that's metal, I'm going to wipe it down with that. And then what I do is I follow it up with my rag. Depends on my condition. If I'm in Texas or something like that and it's so, I don't know if it's hot and humid there or not, but if you're in a hot and humid environment, I might not even wipe it down with a rag. I would just leave the silicone on there. But it's not really hot and humid here, certainly not in my gun safe. And there you have it. That's how I clean, lubricate, and reassemble my P365, and those are the products that I use. Okay, in closing here, I just want to go over a couple things that are actually in the technical manual from SIG Sauer. As far as lubrication, what we're basically trying to establish here is maintain maximum operational readiness of the user's firearm, okay? Because that's the reason why we're cleaning it the way we just did in this video. So of the 4 major categories, reasons for failure, lack of cleaning and lubrication is one of them, the other being user error, the wrong type of ammunition, or worn or broken parts. So it is one of the major reasons why your firearm would malfunction. So it's very important that it's cleaned. As far as the frequency, right in the manual it says properly clean, lubricate, and preserve the firearm each time it is fired or exposed to adverse environmental conditions. So SIG Sauer themselves are recommending that every single time you fire your pistol, before you put it away for an extended period of time, essentially, they recommend that you clean it. So nowhere in there does it say that once in the lifetime of the firearm or once a year or anything like that. So those are just my recommendations. I'm only going to recommend what the manufacturer actually recommends. That way, if you do have a malfunction or an error, it's not something that I told you that was incorrect. So there you go. There's the video. And if you haven't visited sigguy.com, I got some pretty useful tools on there. The pin removal tool, which we used in this video, and I got different ones for different SIG Sauer pistols, as well as the SIG Armor's accessibility tool for the P320, and all kinds of upgrades for the 365, 320, and classic P Series SIG. So sigguy.com, check that out. As always, I appreciate everybody watching. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you very much. Have a good day.